If you present the stock villain devoid of any human frailty, will have a stock reaction to your story. I want to be thrown off balance. I want to feel some ambivalence about your antagonist. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and writing coach, and each week we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let's begin. Recently, I watched the Netflix series Baby Reindeer. At least at the time of this recording, I've just finished watching it. Now, at first, I thought it was too grim for me. There was one episode in particular that's very disturbing. So I gave up on it, but I gave it another chance, and I'm so glad I did. It's based on a true story of the actor Richard Gadd, who also wrote and starred in it. The series follows a struggling comedian and bartender, Donnie, played by Richard Gadd, who is stalked by Martha, a customer at the bar he works in. Now, Martha is unhinged, and the more he tries to distance himself from her, the more desperate and unrelenting and ultimately threatening her stalking and harassment become. What's striking about this story to me is how the stalker is portrayed with nuance and complexity. Now, we don't get her backstory, and we don't need it. You see the pain underneath. You feel that emotional ache that drives her to obsessively stalk her victim. It's clear that Richard Gadd, who played himself, truly felt compassion for her. You could say she's the villain, but he never portrays her as the stock villain. Yes, he's victimized by her, and he endures a lot, but he shows his own culpability in what happened. The real woman that the character was based on was recently interviewed, and she wasn't as sympathetic in real life. It's clear she's a liar, and her logic just didn't add up. She wasn't as likable. She wasn't as sympathetic. Now, to what extent some things are fictionalized for the sake of good storytelling, I don't know. Richard Gadd said he changed key facts about her for the show. His intent was never to out her. He said, what's been borrowed is an emotional truth, not a fact-by-fact profile of someone. But the writing is honest, brave, and above all, compassionate towards his perpetrator. Usually, a stalker in a movie is one-dimensional. It's a one-note villain, and that's exactly what we want to avoid in our stories. So hats off to Gadd for brilliant, nuanced writing and Jessica Gunning for a performance that makes you at turns appalled and afraid, and minutes later, heartbroken for her. The other thing I loved about this series is that as the protagonist who's being victimized by this mentally unstable middle-aged woman shows his own culpability in what happened, he doesn't let himself off the hook. But here's where I'm going with all of this. Often writers create antagonists who are the stock bad guy or bad girl. There's nothing redeeming about them. Sometimes they're abusive or neglectful parents. Sometimes it's an enemy. But even when you're writing about someone who does bad things, even when you're writing about someone who does evil things, abusive things even, what you want to avoid is simply portraying what we'd expect. The stock villain. That's just a caricature. If you do that, the reader will have a stock reaction. So here are some tips to bring more nuance and complexity to your antagonist or your villain, your most troublesome characters. Number one, find some part of yourself in your antagonist. When you find some part of yourself in your antagonist, however small that is, the reader can find some small part of themselves in him or her too. They can identify with some aspect of them. We don't have to like them. We certainly can detest or even fear what they do, but one-dimensional characters are boring. They don't surprise us at all. They just portray the givens, the status quo, what we'd expect. So you want to complicate our reaction just a little bit. So how do you find some part of yourself in your most troublesome characters? The best way is to tap into your own impulses. Many great actors say that when they play the role of a villain, a killer, let's say, they're pulling from some shadow aspect of themselves. The thing is, as unconscionable as our characters' actions may be, we often have the very same impulses. We've just learned to suppress them. But the great thing about our characters is that they have full permission to act out the things we may want to do, the things we may fantasize about doing, but would never ever do. My mentor, Diane Lepper, once said this, and I'll never forget it. It was so wise. She said, "We all have a killer inside. We all have a saint inside. We have everything big and everything small." So find a part of yourself in your antagonist, even if it's just a small part that you can identify with. Okay, on to number 2. Explore your character's motives. Some writers are writing fantasy or thriller, and there's always a villain on the loose that the protagonist has to conquer. I know some of you are writing a character who is supposed to be pure evil, even inhuman. So you don't feel the need to have any tragic backstory for him or her. You don't want to give a reason. He's bad because this or that happened. Why can't villains just be villains? So maybe you just want to portray a true monster, and you want the reader to not ask why he's the way he is or what turned him into this thing. You can't think of a reason, or you don't even want to think or give a reason for their bad and dangerous actions. Your antagonist is literally a monster. I think of something evil like Voldemort. Sometimes the antagonist or villain is a person. Let's say it's an abusive parent. Your reader doesn't need to know their backstory or even have any compassion for them. The villain doesn't need a reason to do what he or she does to the reader. The reader doesn't need to know that. But you, as the author, need to know what this villain wants and why. Why does getting what he or she wants matter? And what does he believe will happen if he doesn't get it? What's the worst thing in his or her mind that could happen? Even the most evil being feels justified in what they're doing. I don't want to know your antagonist's backstory unless it's relevant. More often than not, the only backstory that's relevant is your protagonist's, and even then, we don't need much. You, however, do need to investigate your antagonist's motive. You need to know your protagonist as deeply as you know your protagonist. That's true whether it's a literal monster or a figurative monster, like an abusive parent. So let's use the abusive parent as an example. We're not supposed to feel compassion for this character. Let's say your main character is in physical danger over and over at the hands of this parent. So you need to think of what's motivating this parent to behave that way. You don't have to tell us, but you can demonstrate it. For example, maybe a father puts his son in danger as a way to toughen him up, to force him to be strong in the world when he's an adult. So, to his way of thinking, he's helping his son prepare for the world ahead of him. In the glass castle, the parents don't provide a safe, protective environment for their kids, but their motives, at least to their thinking, are for the best. It's definitely skewed, but they believe in living off the grid. They believe in defying convention. They feel their values are superior. They also believe that their hands-off parenting will ultimately help their kids. They believe danger and hardship builds their character and resilience. So everyone believes they're right. Even a literal monster like Voldemort feels justified in doing evil things. Your antagonist is the hero in his or her own story. So you want to get under their skin. Don't get locked into your own judgments about your antagonist. So, number 2, motive. Think about the worldview that's fueling your antagonist's actions. Okay, on to number 3. Reveal a chink in the armor. If you present the stock villain devoid of any human frailty, will have a stock reaction to your story. I want to be thrown off balance. I want to feel some ambivalence about your antagonist. For example, in Baby Reindeer, even though the stalker is obsessive, aggressive, scary at times, and even driven to violence, there are so many moments where we see the pain and longing underneath. We don't get her backstory. We don't need it. It's all imbued in the action. And at the very end, after his stalker has been convicted and is in prison, we learn through an old phone message he's listening to why she called him Baby Reindeer. It was a toy she had as a child. It's about the only backstory we get. It's subtle, and it's just enough to make us feel heartbreak for her. So we have a complicated reaction to her. And that's what you want to do with all your characters, especially your antagonist, especially your villain. Okay, on to number 4, contradiction. You want to bring contradiction to the antagonist, but you also want to bring contradiction to your protagonist's response to the antagonist. For example, in The Glass Castle, the parents are Jeanette Wall's antagonists. They're neglectful. They live with no heat, hardly any food, barely what qualifies as shelter. For the most part, they're homeless. Now, as an adult, she's ashamed of them. She's embarrassed by them, but she still loves them. The parents aren't monsters. They're not just bad parents. They create a certain amount of magic in their kids' lives, and that's what she clings to. For example, when they were young, their father took them demon hunting. He gave them stars for Christmas. Now, Jeanette Walls has said that she didn't see herself as a victim of child abuse. Even though she ultimately chose to break free and become the very opposite of her parents, there was enough contradiction to make them not just stock bad parents, but also the people she loved. So there was contradiction. As much as she wanted to escape her life with them as soon as she was able to, her desire to escape was complicated by her love for them. It just wouldn't be as powerful if she escaped bad parents, but they were bad parents who she was still bonded to, who she still had love for. So you can hold two opposing feelings and both can be true. But what if your antagonist just brings terror for your main character? What if your character has no love for this person? Then what other details can you bring that would be diametrically opposed to who they are in private? What would make it undetectable in the outside world? For example, if there's an abusive father, maybe dad has a highly respected job in government, for example. In Andre Dubus's short story, The Killings, we start out believing that the man who killed the main character's son is undeserving of any sympathy. But by the end of the story, after the main character shoots him dead, we feel sad for him, possibly sadder for him than the son who he murdered. Why? Because there's so much contradiction in the way he's portrayed. In Baby Reindeer, Martha is intelligent and sometimes extremely wise. She's also cruel, she's vicious at times, she's desperate, but we always get a sense of emotional pain right beneath the surface, at least as she's played by Jessica Gunning. I don't get that sense from the real-life person, but I'm glad Richard Gadd portrayed her as a tragic character rather than a one-dimensional stalker. Martha surprises us. She's this, but she's also that. Hannibal Lecter is a monster. He's a vicious cannibal. But he's also elegant. He's deeply perceptive. And that makes him much scarier. When you bring those contradictions to your antagonist, you throw us off balance. Conflict isn't just between characters. The conflict happens within the reader. That's the best kind. That's the power of story. Okay, on to number 5. Have your antagonist reflect your character's internal problem. Your antagonist is not there to just wreak havoc on your protagonist's life. They're in the story to trigger your protagonist's deepest flaws and fears. That's what your antagonist represents. They're in the story to force your character to change. So they represent your character's greatest fear. It's the shadow side of your protagonist. That's the true purpose of your antagonist. Yes, they make trouble. Yes, they create mounting obstacles, but their real purpose in story is to reveal something essential about who your protagonist is deep down, things that have been brewing beneath the surface, things they weren't even conscious of until the antagonist exposed them. Ultimately, they help your character self-actualize. They're forced to confront their deepest fears, but ultimately their greatest powers. Now, to help you along with this, I have a free PDF. It's a character questionnaire with 13 questions that help you access your character, especially the most troublesome characters, in a deeper way. To grab it, go to nancypanuccio.com/character. You'll get 13 questions to ask your character. Just trust what comes up. And the PDF comes along with an email series to help you with all your characters. That's nancypanuccio.com/character. I'll link in the show notes. Okay, let's recap. To go beyond the stock villain to create a more compelling, captivating antagonist, number 1, find some part of yourself in him or her. Number 2, explore your antagonist's motives. Number 3, reveal a chink in the armor. Number 4, use contradiction to complicate our reaction. And number 5, reflect your protagonist's internal problem. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform and please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.